I'm Alex Smith, I'm Regional Analyst here at Intelligence Fusion, and I'm going to be talking about the forthcoming 20th Party Congress in China. So the Congress happens every 5 years, has done for several decades. It's kind of the main event in Chinese politics. It's quite choreographed, it's a bit of a rubber stamp thing, but it's where the party gets together, looks back at the previous 5 years, delivers a work report, big speeches are made, you get hints at what the policies will be in the forthcoming 5 years. And most importantly, it's where decisions are made, or rather announcements are made about who's going to get the next top jobs, who gets to the Politburo for the next term, who's out. Most importantly, of course, who's going to be General Secretary of the party for the forthcoming 5 years. So what's important about this party congress is Xi Jinping is expected to stay on for a third term in power. Xi Jinping has been in power now for 10 years, and under conventions established under Deng Xiaoping at the beginning of the reform and opening period, he should be stepping down. That's what his predecessors Hu Jintao did and Jiang Zemin. It's widely believed he's going to stay on for another term as General Secretary and therefore President, because General Secretary and President have gone hand in hand since Jiang Zemin. If he does this, it will break the convention on only having 2 terms. It'll also break the convention that's been established on retirement ages, which is known as 7 up, 8 down. So at 67, if you can take another term. If you're 68, you're expected to retire. She's now 69. So it'll kind of be a double convention breaking thing. This gets touted a lot as, it's unprecedented. And yeah, it is. But it's also not that well established, really. People also see a bit of confusion with, it's reported as he's going to stay on for a third term as president. Really, president, it's another office. He became president in 2013. It's general secretary that is the he's party secretary. That's like the real pinnacle of the party and where the power lies. It's just president goes with that. He's also chairman of the CMC, which is the Central Military Commission, which is another big important position. It basically means the PLA, the army, answers to him. He's widely expected to keep all 3 of these roles. There's also another interesting theory, although I'm not really sure how much weight to give it, that she could look to reinstate the old office of party chairman, most famously held by Chairman Mao, but abolished in 1982. If he did this, it would kind of elevate him above the Politburo Standing Committee to sort of be in an unassailable position, with everyone subordinate to him. Who knows? He might. It's an interesting theory. I'd be surprised if that happened, though. In terms of, does she have the support to stay in power? Yes, I think he probably does. There's a narrative around Xi that he's a strong man and that he seems to be in power just through coercion. But the fact is, he's a party man. He's a product of the party. He rules through the party, and that's what makes him what he is. He's not going out, and an analogy I like that I've heard is, he doesn't wake up every morning and arm wrestle his way to dominance in the party. He's there because people support him and people are on board with his agenda. Is there factionalism within the party? Does everyone agree with him? No, I'm sure not. The trouble is that's near impossible to judge. Party business is done behind closed doors. It's really a black box. People can come up with theories, people can read the tea leaves and come up with ideas of factional infighting and stuff. But really, when it comes to the elite Chinese politics, no one really knows anything, no matter what they say. Xi has certainly consolidated his power. He weaponized an anti-corruption campaign very early on. It's not the only reason he ran an anti-corruption campaign, but that's removed a lot of dissenters and people who may have not supported him. He's also been able to place his own supporters in positions of power. He was announced as the core of the party. His own ideological work has been put into the constitution. It's Xi Jinping Thought, and there's also a cult of personality that's sort of come about around him as a result of this. There's sort of like his past is sort of hear like hagiographies of his past and where he came from. So he's certainly consolidated power like no one else has before. There are factions within the party, and not everyone's going to support Xi, but I think he's stacked the deck sufficiently in his favour that if he wants to stay, he's staying. So Xi's first 10 years have been quite interesting. He's really tried to re-establish the party at the centre of all aspects of Chinese life after, certainly under the Hu era. You could argue the party was lacking relevance. It was very corrupt. It's sort of quite moribund in terms of ideology. He has really looked to shift power back to the party and establish the party as, you know, the central aspect of Chinese society. More recently, he's moved to a more sort of state-led economy. He's tried to clip the wings of some private industry, certainly the tech sector most recently. We've seen sort of outspoken critics sort of disappear, only to reappear a few months later looking very contrite. We've seen the phrase always used is assertive, but I would say a more bellicose foreign policy, whether that's in the South China Sea with regards to Taiwan, in trade negotiations with the Americans. And I think that's probably going to continue. We've had the rise of what's so-called wolf warrior diplomacy, where, rhetoric waged on Twitter by Chinese diplomats and stuff. They're a lot more forthright, a lot more bellicose. I think you could argue that we'd have seen this anyway. It's easy to think, well, Xi Jinping's in power, therefore it's because of him. But the fact is, China has been on this trajectory of a hugely growing economy, greater world power, huge military that's modernised. That's another thing Xi's done. He's done a lot of work to modernise and professionalise the PLA, the People's Liberation Army. And we're really seeing that, certainly during the exercise they held around Taiwan. We're seeing the fruits of that long-term modernisation plan really start to come through for them. But the key thing is he's established the party and sort of taken back control of a lot of aspects in Chinese society that were probably slipping away under the previous administration. So another 5 or more years of Xi. What can we expect? I would expect more of the same. I mean, there's a question: will he feel more secure in power and therefore calm down, or will he feel more secure in power and double down on previous policies? I think more likely we'll see him double down on assertive foreign policy, things like the zero COVID. I don't suppose that will just disappear. I'd imagine we'll see more of that. State control of aspects of the economy will probably continue, if not increase. What's probably more interesting with this Congress, it's not so much all about Xi. He'll probably stay in, he'll probably do more of the same. There are other questions, though. Who are going to get the top jobs? The Premier, Li Keqiang, who's been with Xi for 10 years, despite only being 67 and eligible to continue, has announced he's leaving. And traditionally that role has been the Premier, who's the head of the government, because the government and the party are technically not the same thing. One of the key portfolio role for the Premier was the economy. Now, Xi has really sidelined Li Keqiang for the last 10 years and the entire state council, the government effectively, in a way that predecessors didn't. The Zhang and Hu both had quite competent, high-profile people serving as their premiers. Li Keqiang has kind of been, like I say, sidelined. He represented a much more technocratic, pro-reform, pro-economy, down with the reforms of Deng Xiaoping, reform and opening, that sort of thing, which stands in contrast to Xi. And he's had a bit of a farewell tour following the leaders' retreat at Baidehe a few months ago, in which he sort of reaffirmed his devotion, if you like, to the reform and opening and the more free market orientated policies. Now, is that a final last hurrah before he goes off into the sunset? Does that imply that maybe things are changing within the party? And that some of the appointments, maybe there's been decisions to put people in that will in some way constrain Xi. There have been signs of that in certainly over the last year. For example, Xi Jinping announced an economic policy called Common Prosperity, which looked a bit like autarky. And that's kind of disappeared off the agenda. Like, no one's really talking about that anymore, whether that's because of economic realities that have come in with the economy slowing, the property market problems, zero COVID, that sort of thing. Or maybe it's because there are actually forces within the party that aren't on board with that and want to do a course correction from Xi's policies or not. I don't know. So who replaces Li Keqiang is a big thing. Who will take ownership of foreign ministry, the economy, who takes the big portfolios when we finally see who's in. That will give us a better idea of where China is heading than just, is Xi Jinping still in power or not? I think the key takeaway is it's not so much whether Xi Jinping stays on in power, because I think that's probably a given. I think we need to look at who's taking the other key positions in the party and the state. Who's going to be on the Politburo Standing Committee? What are their portfolios going to be? Are they going to influence, put a handbrake on Xi's policies, or are they just going to be Xi's guys and push forward his agenda regardless? Thanks for watching this episode of The Insight. If you'd like to join the conversation, please join our Discord server using the link in the description.